everybody in there from the foyer, and we're going to go ahead and take our songbooks and turn to page 533. 533, there's joy in serving Jesus. Go ahead and stand when you find it. We'll do the first and the last verse this morning, 533. There is joy in serving Jesus as I journey on my way. Joy that fills the heart with praises every hour and every day. There is joy, joy, joy in serving Jesus, joy that throbs within my heart. Every moment, every hour, as I draw upon His power, there is joy, joy, joy that never shall depart. 533 on the fourth. There is joy in serving Jesus, joy amid the darkest night, for I've learned the wondrous secret, and I'm walking in the light. There is joy, joy, joy in serving Jesus, joy that throbs within my heart. Every moment, every hour, as I draw upon His power, there is joy, joy, joy that never shall depart. Amen. You can be seated, and I'm going to get Brother Nathanael Wasson up here as quick as possible, and he's going to take some time this morning to present what they're planning to do there for the Lord in Alaska. And we were talking about it yesterday, and I'm sure it's going to come up a little bit, but we were sitting there at the table last night, and I said, well, you know, how we were talking about the weather, the summer, you know, how warm does it get in the summer? About 75 is about the warmest it gets. You know, usually it's in the 60s in the summer. And I said, man, I don't know about that. How cold does it get? It's not as bad as, what did you say? It's not as bad as Fairbanks. It gets 65 below in Fairbanks. It's only 35 below where we're going. I said, oh, that's way better. Way better. But anyway, so excited to have them to come and present this morning. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the morning service. And then also, even this evening, he's going to preach for us. But, brother, if you'd come up here, and time is yours.
All right, it is good to be back with you this morning. We've got about a 10-minute video. We'll start out by showing that here in just a second, if we can. But we're headed to Bethel, Alaska. That is 400 miles west of Anchorage. It's out there on the western side of Alaska, about 45 miles off the coast. The Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta is specifically the area we plan to work in. It is primarily the Yupik people and the Athabascan as well, the large majority being Yupik in that area. So traditionally, they would have spoken Yupik as their language. That's primarily a dead language now. The elders are fairly fluent in it, but most of the young people know very little, if much at all, of that language anymore. Everybody's taught English. Everybody speaks English fluently. All of that. Everybody is required to attend school and all of that. By required, they attend to a certain point, and many times they never actually graduate. Because of a lot of the other things going on there. So that being said, if we can, we'll watch the video at this time, and then I'll say some more after that. My name is Nathanael Wasson, and this is my wife, Amanda, and our 3 children, Othniel, Evangeline, and Isabella. We are being sent out directly by our home church, Ottumwa Baptist Temple, in Ottumwa, Iowa. We are missionaries to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta of western Alaska. When most people think of Alaska, they picture vast mountain ranges, glaciers, snowy peaks, and beautiful forest. While much of Alaska does fit that description, one would not find any of those things in the YK Delta. Bethel, Alaska sits on a vast tundra, making it impossible for any traditional structures. Houses are built on what is called post and pad to allow the permafrost to stay frozen and avoid major shifting. Most people have to have their houses re-leveled at least once a year to avoid major shifts and cracks. About half of the city of Bethel has above-ground city piping, while the other half is on tank water and sewer. The above-ground piping makes it extremely susceptible to the freezing temperatures, often causing broken pipes. It is not uncommon for people to be out of water for several weeks or even until spring, when it becomes warm enough for the pipes to be thawed and repaired. The Yupik people also rely heavily on subsistence living as part of their culture and survival. Hunting, fishing, trapping, and berry picking are very prevalent. We were able to firsthand witness all the hard work the people put into the salmon fishing, cleaning, and curing process. Nets are placed strategically in the river, and once the salmon are caught, they are sorted, cleaned, and prepared for cutting. A special knife called the yulu is traditionally used to cut the thick salmon meat. Each fish is specifically cut to allow for optimal drying, hanging, and smoking. There is an art to the drying and smoking process, and most people have to tend the smokehouses at their fish camps constantly for at least a week, until the fish is dried and smoked enough to achieve the right texture and flavor, and to protect the precious salmon from the wildlife and weather. Muskox and moose are also hunted to provide meat, and traditionally used to make warm winter clothes. Today, the muskox wool is very valuable commercially. Salmon berries, blueberries, blackberries, and cranberries are also picked, frozen, canned, and preserved to provide nutrients through the long, dark winters. Bethel is off the road system, meaning there are no roads connecting it to any other town or place. Because of this, the only means of travel outside of Bethel is by boat, airplane, and snow machine. The town of Bethel, in and of itself, has a total of 16 miles of road, only 10 of which are paved. Because of the lack of roads, everything from a gallon of milk to building materials and gravel must be either barged or flown in. Due largely to the cost of freight, supplies and resources can be difficult to get and very expensive. Bethel and the surrounding villages are spiritually dark. The suicide rate is 14 times higher, fetal alcohol syndrome is 2 times higher, and accidental deaths are 3 times higher than the national average. This is mostly due to alcohol consumption. Alcohol is one of the leading causes of violent crimes, jail sentences, preventable deaths, and abuse among the Yupik people. While most people do not claim a main religion, Russian Orthodox, Moravian, and Catholicism are the most prevalent. A great challenge for the Yupik young people is that many have suffered abuse at an early age. This is in large part due to the terrible alcohol abuse problem in rural Alaska. This makes suicide, murder, and alcoholism seem trivial because they have no value, purpose, or meaning for the precious life God has given to them.
Hi, my name is Bruce Claypool. I'm a pastor of Bethel Independent Baptist Church, and behind me you can see part of the town of Bethel, Alaska. We have about 6,000 people here in the town of Bethel. We're the only Baptist church literally in the entire area. There's one other Baptist missionary in the YK Delta. The YK Delta has thousands of people, many dozens of villages scattered across the YK Delta. Very little gospel preaching works going on in this part of the state. The need is tremendous. The area is vast. The spiritual darkness is severe. And there is a tremendous need for spiritual workers in this part of the state of Alaska. Because it's so logistically difficult to get to these places, there's just a real scarcity of laborers. There's a real scarcity of people willing to come out to places like this and carry the gospel message into these very difficult and hard to reach places. So Nathanael and Amanda came out this week to help us with our vacation Bible school, and just in the few days that they've been out here, they've already been a tremendous help and a tremendous blessing to our church and to our family and to the people of Bethel.
In the spring of 2023, after much prayer and counsel with our pastor, we could see the Lord beginning to lead us into the next step of our service to Him. As we were praying and seeking direction, the Lord opened the door for our family to travel to Bethel, Alaska, and assist the Claypool family in their ministry. It was during this short time that the Lord made it very clear that He was leading us to become fellow laborers in the great need of reaching the lost in Bethel and the surrounding villages.
A young girl waits in a far distant land. She has no one to show her God's love, no mother or father to wipe away the tears. She cries out in the night alone. Bury my heart on a mission field, Lord. I'll go to dry that young girl's tears. I'll serve you no matter where the path may lead. Lord, please carry my heart. A mother grieves for a starving child. She has no shelter from the cold. Earthly provisions will ease their suffering, but who will feed their empty souls? Bury my heart on a mission field, Lord. I'll go to dry that young girl's tears. I'll serve you no matter where the path may lead. Lord, please carry my heart. Will you ignore these lost souls in the night? Can you hear their pleading cries? They're begging for someone to show them the way. We must go before another one dies. Bury my heart on the mission field, Lord. These distant voices won't fade away. I'll do your will, no matter the cost. Lord, please bury my heart. Lord, I'll give you my heart.
A brief overview of some of the area up there and what it's like there. I'll back up a little bit and then come up to that. Just give you a little bit of my history. I was, excuse me, I was born in Houghton, Hancock in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Got saved at the age of 7 in South Dakota. Lived there for about 13 years and then moved to Iowa about 7 years ago. When I was about 7 there, I knew how to be saved, grew up in a Christian home, and I just had this idea in my mind that, hell is not as bad as they tell me. If I get there, I'll get saved then, and I'll get out. Now, that idea was never taught to me. That was just the idea I somehow came up with, but I realized one day that, that's not the way it works. If I make it to hell, it is over. It is too late. I'm there forever. And it scared me to death, and so I went and talked to my mom. I knew how to be saved, but she walked me through the plan of salvation again, and I trusted Christ as my Savior there when I was 7. Continued on with life there when I was 13 years old. I know that's not all that old, but I wanted to know what life was all about. I wanted to know what my purpose in life was. I knew God had a purpose for me, and I wanted to know specifically what it was. I really thought I was going to be a business owner and just support a good church there, but the Lord had other ideas, so I was just praying, seeking Him on that, and He brought me full circle on that and said, no, I know you don't want to be in the ministry. I know you just want to support it, but I got another plan. And so it took me a little while to convince myself that that I would be willing to do that. But the Lord brought me to Moses there in the backside of the desert. Moses is arguing with God, and I'm grossly paraphrasing, but Moses is like, Lord, I can't because, and Lord, I can't because I can't talk, and I can't because I'm just nobody, and Lord, I can't. And ultimately the Lord says, yeah, you can't, but I can. And that's really what it had to be was just, God, I'm nobody. I'm not going to do it because it's me, but Lord, I'll do it because you can do it. And so Paul said, when I am weak, then I am strong. So it's the Lord. It's not because I'm a great somebody. It's not because I'm a great speaker. I'm not. I get nervous in front of people. It's just a fact. I'm sorry, but it is the Lord. So fast forward a little bit. When I was 19, I was talking to Brother Travis Decker, which is my wife's father, and he's the pastor there at Nathanael Baptist Temple, and he was talking about starting a Bible Institute. I knew I needed some more training. I did not have a piece about going to a Bible college at that time, and so he said, well, I'm willing to start a Bible Institute if you're willing to come. And I said, sounds good. And so I moved down in the spring of 18 to Iowa there, and took 4 years Bible Institute there under Pastor Travis Decker, which is my wife's father-in-law. He was over in, what? That's my wife's father, not my wife's father-in-law. That's, woo, wow, really. Anyways, got a funny look there in a hurry. I was just seeing if you were awake this morning. Just kidding. Anyways, he was over in Belarus and Russia for about 18 years, came back to the States in 14 during the Crimean deal there, and took the church there in 15, I believe, spring of 15. So I met Amanda. My older brother married her older sister, Brianna, and so that made it convenient. And so we got to know each other. Not that was the only reason why we got married, but it did make it easier. But we got to know each other, got married there in 2020, COVID, which was actually perfect for a quiet honeymoon. But Lord led us to Alaska. Thereafter, I met Brother Claypool in 2018 at our missions conference. Our church supports him, and just had a real burden for Alaska. But the Lord kept closing the door there. I wanted to go on a mission trip. The Lord just kept closing those doors, and so I gave up on that. And we pretty much decided that we're a large advocate of people going on a mission trip. So we decided we were going to go on a mission trip to Bulgaria in 2022. Help the Shigalises over there in Bulgaria, and so we went on that trip. Great trip. Learned a lot. Of course, she understands part of that language. I was the outsider that understood nothing. And so that was an experience for me. But came back from that, and the Lord immediately opened the door up for Alaska again. And so we actually booked a missions trip. And the plan was to just go up there, help them with their vacation Bible school. We bought tickets in December, I believe, for June. And then from that time on, the Lord just kept working on us. And it was more than a missions trip. The Lord was calling us there. And one thing He used was He showed us how He had prepared us for that field. Of course, her growing up in Russia, me growing up in South Dakota, we didn't always have a lot. Diesel mechanic by trade, just many different things along the way. And so we went there. We never let Brother Claypool know that we believed the Lord was calling us there. We wanted to see it at face value, not that he would intentionally change something for us, but about 3 days in, we just knew that that's where the Lord wanted us. And so we talked to the Claypools there. They had been praying for somebody, that the Lord would send them somebody for about a year. And so that was kind of the confirmation, if you will. We knew that's where the Lord wanted us. And so we came back and started preparing for deputation, and have really been in that process since then. So that is a brief history on my side. Now to Alaska. Bethel is very important for several reasons, one of which is it's a hub village. It has a commercial airport, and it has a dock. They can get ocean-going barges up to Bethel. Right after Bethel, the river shallows up substantially, and so all the supplies for the delta, more or less, are shipped into Bethel and then shipped out of there to the other places, especially the air supplies. So it's all flown into Bethel. It gets broken up on smaller planes, Navajos, caravans, 207s, 210s, and such, and it gets flown out to these other villages from there. Same thing with a lot of the fuel. Bethel is the cheapest place as far as most of those supplies go. The first barge in is typically the fuel barge. And so, you saw the price in the video. It was $6.68 a gallon for regular unleaded. That's the price for the year. Whenever that barge come in, whatever the price on that barge is, that's the price for the year. Typically, they'll top it off in the fall, and it may change slightly. But that's the way that works up there. So that's one of the reasons why Bethel is so important. Of course, Bethel has the only hospital in the Delta. They've got the only lumberyard. They've got the only real grocery stores. All of that stuff is in Bethel. There's no real fast food. There's no Walmart. There's none of that stuff, but they've got everything you need to survive in Bethel. And anybody else, if they need something, they're either going to Bethel or to Anchorage to get it. So our basic plan is to live in Bethel at first and to start a circuit-style ministry out of Bethel into those other villages, to start some vacation Bible schools. The kids are one of the easiest avenue into those communities. There's no public activities going on to speak of. There's no draw for the kids, if that makes sense. And so you show up with a bag of balloons and start telling a story, you'll have every kid in that village in 20 minutes. They're just right there because there's nothing going on, generally speaking. They may be at fish camp or different things, but most of the time they're just right there. And so you do that for a couple days. Usually the second or the third day, the adults start to come out. They want to see what's up, and you can start to make those connections with the adults of the community and start to talk to those and work with those people. So our plan is from there to start Bible studies, and Lord willing, as we see fruit in those different areas, to move into one of those villages and plant a church is our general thought line, and that's kind of broad, but we'll work out the details when we get there. If you plan real specifically in that part of the world, your plans are going to change. It's just a fact. They say about 60% of ministry up there is just logistics. It's just getting from point A to point B, just getting your supplies, just getting everything lined up from point A to point B, and all of that. So before you even get to present the gospel to somebody, if you're working in one of those remote places, you've got to get there. And you've got to get all of that. So it's a little different style ministry as far as that goes. The Delta is about 27,000 people, so it's not a metropolis area, but it is a very, very spiritually dark area. And so that is our general thought line. The suicide rates, as the video mentioned, are astronomical. They are absolutely mind-blowing, and it's primarily 18 to 25-year-old men. That is the number one primary group. The guys that have not. They have no real experience in life, and they have no real purpose in life. Marriage is not all that, important to them up there and such. And so a lot of people aren't getting married. A lot of people aren't raising a family. A lot of the younger people especially are turning to the government for subsidy. And so it takes away the purpose of work from men. And in a lot of ways, they feel worthless. They have no purpose. And so in their eyes, they're doing themselves a service by committing suicide. And the tragedy of that is they're sending themselves straight to a devil's hell. And typically, it's their mom or it's a grandma that finds them. And there's no funeral homes in Alaska, in that part of Alaska. It's all firsthand experience for the family. And so it throws a different light on it. It is all very in person. Death is very real to those people, but in their eyes, they're doing themselves a service. So a lot of people ask about the light and darkness there. They get about 24 hours of daylight in the middle of summer. They get about an hour or so of twilight, kind of dusk, and then the sun rises again in the summer. In the middle of winter, the least amount of daylight they get is about 3 hours. Sun rises about 10, sets about 1. That is relatively short-lived where they're at just because of where they're positioned in the state and such. So that's kind of a general brief overview, and there's a lot of details I missed. That being said, are there any questions this morning? No questions?
So logistically speaking, like when you go into these towns and all this stuff to set up a vacation Bible school and all that, I mean, what's the general like RV or something like that you're going to be driving? I mean, I know it's probably difficult to do that where you're at, but how do you get in, stay there, and get out? You know?
So there's no roads outside of the villages themselves, unless it's wintertime, and then you can run the ice road that used to be maintained as a state highway, actually. So in the summertime, there is no roads outside of Bethel or the villages. So you're either flying in or boating into these different places in the summer, and then there's typically a community building of sorts that you can have access to. And so as long as you find the guy with the keys for that, typically you can have access to that, and then you can kind of base out of there, live in there more or less, and base out of that. Otherwise, you tent it basically. If you're there for a week or what have you. And then you just, bring all your supplies, bring all the stuff you need, all the food you need, all of that stuff. You can buy it there, but give you an example of pricing. Bethel's a hub village. St. Mary's is 90 miles north of Bethel. There's another missionary there. That's the other missionary Brother Claypool referred to, but that's a sub-hub village, so they got a little more access to stuff. All the other villages are just regular villages. So a gallon of milk in Bethel on average is $12 a gallon. St. Mary's on average is 18. Any of the other villages is about 24. So just to give you an idea, and you're just paying for freight. So you want to pack all the stuff you can and such like that. Of course, that costs extra fuel in the boat and such. If that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, so how does anybody live up there then as far as, I mean, they're not making a lot of money.
They're not.
So, they can't afford that stuff, really. So what are they doing to...
So a lot of the natives have some subsidy, and then there's subsistence living. A lot of people, believe it or not, they don't have a purpose for milk. It's too expensive, so they eat fish, berries, and that's really what they largely survive off of. Of course, they'll buy some flour, stuff like that, and they'll buy other things too. It depends on the group too. The older people lean much more heavily on subsistence living. The younger people have found ways to get more subsidy from the government. Grants are the thing of Alaska, and so they've figured out how to do more. Work the government more or less, and so the younger people really don't have to work that much if they don't want to. And there's definitely a generation coming in that part of the world where they're turning from their ancestors. They're tired of following them. They're tired of all this way of life, if you will, and they're turning to the government to get out of that, which is just more or less sealing their fate in a lot of ways. So Obama brought technology to that part of the world. Prior to that, there was no cell service, there was no internet. So there was very little connection with the outside world prior to that. It was all ham radio and such. And so that has really changed the dynamic up there a lot, because now people can see the outside world. They're seeing all the other things. With that, the drugs and alcohol spikes very high as well. So does that answer?
Yeah. So are they, is their ultimate goal to get out of there, or they just stay there and...
That's a mixed bag. A lot of them, they don't know anything else. So they're not really trying to leave, but they're like, well, if we leave, what are we going to do somewhere else? They have no real experience with anything else. That's where they've always lived. That's where their families have always lived. They don't really know anything else. And so a lot of them have no desire to leave. There's nothing better anywhere else in their mind. Some of the younger people are. The National Guard went up there recruiting, and they were very successful and gave a lot of guys, from a worldly point of view, a lot of guys hope because they got them out there, got them out of there, trained them, and made these guys something, which was very, very good in a non-spiritual sense. But a lot of them aren't trying to leave. But then there are others that are, and of course technology brings that too. But a lot of them have no way to leave. They have no kind of means to get out. And so a lot of those people often migrate to Bethel and do drugs till they don't have a mind left. However you want to put that. Yes.
You mentioned the reception from the youth on Vacation Bible School presenting the gospel. What's the reception? What's the general reception of presenting the gospel to adults?
Yes. So the older people are somewhat more standoffish, if you will. And the reason for that is a lot of people go hunting and fishing in that part of the world. That some of the best moose hunting in Alaska is right in that area, which is to no fault of people down here. But the native people see people come and go, and they see a lot of people up there work contract. For the troopers, they're in and out in those villages. They work a rotation, but then the schools work contract. All the different jobs, a lot of them in that area are contract, and so the native people see people come and go. And you have to work past that. You have to some degree, prove yourself to them, prove that you're there for their good and that you're not leaving tomorrow. And so just because of that, it's a time factor, really. You have to be there long enough for them to understand the fact that you're going to be here tomorrow and you're not flying out and they'll never see you again. But that is definitely one thing you have to work past, is they're somewhat cynical about what they would consider white folk. If you're not native up there, you're white. It's just a fact. You're white just means you're from the lower 48, not that you're actually white. But that's just the way it is up there. So they are somewhat cynical about that because in their minds, you're leaving in 6 months or a year when you show up. So you do have to work past that. Yes, sir.
Are you able to have services or what in those winter months?
Yes. So there's about 2 months of the year where travel is really difficult to impossible. During the fall, when it's freeze up and there's not enough ice on the river to get on the rivers, and during the spring when it's break up and the ice is coming out of the rivers. During those 2 months, travel is really, really difficult unless you're flying, and flying is also really difficult because the weather is changing so much and such that it's often fog and such like that, so you can't fly either a lot of times during those 2 months. Otherwise, yes, you can hold services basically year-round as long as you've got some place to meet. And once you get to know people, the natives are very hospitable people by nature. They'll invite you into their house. They're very friendly by nature. That doesn't mean they're receptive. It just means they're friendly. But so a lot of times you can hold services in houses if you can't get into the community center or such. So yes, you should be able to work year-round. Yes, sir.
What is the main source of heat? Is it wood, fuel?
Wood and fuel oil. So a lot of people burn wood and have fuel oil as backup. It was propane, but fuel oil is a lot cheaper to freight and such. And so there's no timber in that part of the delta. And so what people do is in the springtime when the ice comes out, it washes down all the trees and such, and so they get in their boat and go rodeo trees, essentially. Haul them out of the river, or you run a snow machine up to the Yukon, because there's timber up there, and haul it back. But otherwise, it's fuel oil. Yes?
What is the normal school year out there, and does every village have a teacher come there, a contract?
Yes. So I don't know what the normal school year, I believe it pretty much follows more or less the school year down here. But as far as the schools, unless they're really small villages, some villages will share a school. If they're considered a half village or whatever, and there's another village right across the river or something like that, then they'll share a school. But otherwise, yes, every village more or less has a school, and has all the teachers for that school, which often is several teachers, and oftentimes there's only twice as many students as there are teachers, because these are pretty small communities. But yes, everybody's required to attend. The dropout rate, there's no statistic on, but I can tell you from talking to everybody up there, it's probably 90%. Because once those kids hit teenagers, all the perversion, let's put it that way, all the perversion attracts them, and they're gone. They're out doing other things. Yes.
Religion, how big is, you know, you talk about orthodoxy and Catholicism, are they big into it, or is it one of those things where it's, you know, they don't really care about religion at all, they just, those are the only ones that are there?
So the Moravians actually opened up that area and established the town of Bethel, hence the name. The Catholics and Russian Orthodox followed suit and were very successful in a lot of those places. The way they did that was there's a lot of squabbling amongst the three, and so they drew up the map of Western Alaska and said, you are, you know, as villages, you are Russian Orthodox, you are Catholic, you're Moravian, etc., and so forth. So all the villages have a religion in theory. What that means today is there's probably 2 people that attend, maybe. Some villages are very staunch about claiming that. Very, very few are practice it hardly at all. A lot of those places don't even have a priest or a pastor or what have you. The thing with those is the Catholics particularly had a bunch of perverted priests they needed to get rid of. And what better place than Western Alaska? Because no one will ever find them up there off the road system. So all the perversion and such that the video talked about, we were talking about, that is not a traditional native culture. That was brought in and adopted, if you will, by the Catholics. So one of the things you never call yourself in that part of the world is a missionary, because a missionary is those guys. And you don't want to be associated with those, obviously. But all of that originated from the Catholics. They said there's probably not a 55-year-old man or older that has not been messed with. Yes?
Does that mean then you face opposition with the Catholic as a Baptist?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Would you be facing opposition?
By and large, no, because there's so few there now. There is a few villages, yes, but pretty much those villages you just leave alone because those villages are very staunchly Catholic. And you're not even welcome there, basically. But by and large, no, there's no real opposition at all because they just don't have a presence anymore.
So I think most of us are familiar with Catholicism and know a little bit about Orthodoxy, but can you explain what Moravianism is for us who are not familiar with it?
Yes. Okay, long story short, back in the day they had a lot of truth, they had a lot of correct doctrine. Not all, but a lot of correct doctrine, including salvation, all of that. It's just another, I don't know what you want to compare it to, Baptists, Presbyterians, such like that. They're not that. They had a lot of correct doctrine back in the day. Today it's just works salvation. It's all neo, and they again have very little presence there anymore.
Do you mind if I just ask, where do they originate from, the Moravians? Or do you know?
Originally it was Germany, I believe, but in the States I don't know for sure.
That's why it was surprising to me to hear that's in Alaska.
Yes.
Moravians.
So the reason the Moravians made it, this is the way the story goes, and I'm running out of time fast, is there were supposedly trappers up in that part of the world, and they were trapping and saw all the heathenism from the natives there. And they came back to every major religious group and said, you've got to send somebody. These are not Christian men, but you've got to send somebody to go work with these people. At the time, the Moravians would go anywhere where no one else would go. They were extreme missionaries. And so they went. And as soon as they went, the Catholics and the Russian Orthodox followed. All right, I am out of time, and I don't want to get shot. So if you have any more questions, feel free to talk to us later.
That's good. There's a lot there, I think, that's very interesting and just so much that, brother, one thing that I was going to ask you, though, is the church that's there, how big is that? How successful are they at really actually reaching the people that are, and again, I mean, success is measured by different things, but
That church is kind of complicated because all the contract work.
Okay, so people in and out.
Largely
Yep.
fluctuates because of
Gotcha,
contract work.
gotcha. Are they seeing success as it comes to like actually leading people to Christ, or is it so cold and so hard that it's very difficult?
They are successful. The church in St. Mary's, Brother Israel Warren, is very successful. He averages probably 45 to 55.
Okay.
It's an entirely native village, about 900 people.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. It's just sometimes I think when you get into places like that and everybody's so hard against it, it's very difficult to see anybody saved, and but that's good. Very good. Well, good. Like you mentioned, he'll be in the back there, and make sure you grab a prayer card and be praying for them. It's just a difficult place to be spiritually, but physically too. And just put yourself in that situation and think about how difficult it would be, and make sure we pray for them. So, but let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll be dismissed. Father, again, we thank you so much for your goodness to us. So thank you for where you've called each one of us, God, and for the Wassons, you've called them to go to Alaska. I pray that you'd help them as they get up there, that you'd help them to learn the culture, learn the people, get to know some good contacts that would help them to be able to get into these villages and establish churches and especially lead some of these young people to Christ that may be able to go on and do more in that area for you. And I pray that you'd send others up there to help as well. I pray that you'd help us here. You've called us here. Every one of us that's in the auditorium this morning has been called to this place. And so I pray that you'd help us to reach this community with the gospel as well, and use the advantages and the really the privilege that you've given us of being here to reach this area for you. And I do pray that you be with the service here in just a few minutes. I pray that you give us what we need to help us to get a greater vision and a greater burden for the lost. Thank you again for all you do for us in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we're dismissed.